You're listening to the Middle Cut Podcast. Irish whiskey in conversation. Brought to you by Potstilled.com, your one-stop shop for Irish whiskey news and interviews. Now, it's time for your hosts.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Middle Cut Podcast. My name is Matt Healy from Potstilled.com, also known as Potstilled Matt, and I am delighted to be joined by the whiskey nerd, the one and only Mr. Matt Jones. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I am delighted to be back for another episode of the Middle Cut Podcast with you. We are sitting down here as once again virtual this month. But I do want to say a very big thank you, as always, whether we're virtual or in person together, to the show sponsors, Irish Malts, your one-stop shop for Irish whiskey, gins, and poutines delivered straight to your door where legal to do so. Check them out on irishmalts.com. They are also the people behind 3 Drams, which is the monthly subscription service that brings 3 new Irish whiskeys to your door every month with an online virtual tasting with the makers and creators of those whiskeys, hosted by yours truly. So I am biased as hell, but I will tell you it's a great way to taste whiskeys with nearly 1,800 other people all around the world. Check out 3drams.com for that. Matt, how are you doing? The whiskey nerd, always great to have you on the show. I'm delighted you're here yet again for another episode.
Mm-hmm. It's good to be here. I mean, it's always fun to talk about whiskey. It's always fun to drink a bit of whiskey. It's always fun to have good times.
Exactly. So as we've gone through every show, you are a very knowledgeable whiskey fellow as yourself. Give us a plug on your social media channels for those who do want to catch up with you online.
Yeah, well, I am known around the internet as the Whiskey Nerd. I'd like to think I live up to that name. I focus on whiskey reviews and whiskey cocktails, featuring whiskeys in different ways, making sure people know you can drink whiskey, you can enjoy it whatever way you like it. But when it comes to reviews, I do tend to focus on Irish whiskey because it's all about promoting Irish whiskey, promoting our native spirit. But it's good to see the little guys coming out again, and I do like featuring smaller brands that do tend to punch above their weight, as we were talking about in the last episode. We were talking about some good Irish brands of focus, and I like to bring up new whiskey distilleries. It's great to see the renaissance of Irish whiskey, and so that's why I focus on Irish whiskey.
Oh, well, absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of people out there can agree with you that focusing on the renaissance of Irish whiskey is a lot of fun. I suppose it is Paddy's Day season. It is as a lot of Irish whiskey companies will attest, it is the Christmas equivalent for Irish whiskey companies. Paddy's Day, as we said in the last episode, we have a lot of punching weight that not just the industry has, but the country has in terms of representing ourselves across the globe for St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is going to be is not just going to be, it is always the largest time of year for on-trade sales in bars and restaurants, and also off-trade in liquor stores, convenience stores, supermarkets, etc. for Irish whiskey. The biggest time of the year. This, I suppose, St. Patrick's Day, we're kind of post a lot of COVID regulations, in most countries, not all, back a little bit more to the norms. We're seeing pre-COVID levels of sales, tourism, visitors, everything else of the likes coming back on stream. The hostels in Dublin are €1,900 a night for a bed in a 12-bed dorm. The world is right.
You do love to see the influx of people that come to Ireland. Like it's great to hear like the amount of different languages. Well, like you'll hear like I one of my guilty pleasures is I go to Butler's Chocolate Cafe, get myself a coffee, comes with a little chocolate. Love doing that. But I love hearing all different languages. People going, oh, look at this chocolate. Oh, look at that chocolate. Because they come to Ireland, like, let's get a bit of a souvenir and let's get this. And I do know it's always a pickup around this time of year. Obviously, you go to a shop like the Celtic Whiskey Shop, you go to James Fox, you're going to see some other kind of crowds there, a bit older, a bit more maybe like getting something fancy for themselves. But it's good to see the amount of people who come over and just enjoy Ireland at this time of year.
Absolutely. For me, there's a lot of brands that obviously every brand is paying attention to St. Patrick's Day. One brand that I think does quite well with St. Patrick's Day is the Lost Irish. Tim Healy over in the US, his brand that he's launched there, very much a brand for the Irish nomads of the world. Very interesting whiskey. But the brand has posted a number of what does St. Patrick's Day really mean posts, which I wanted to start the show with. The first one is when someone asks you if you know Bono, say yes, he's my dad.
Yeah.
Always a fantastic way to shut that down. It says again, I'm going to preference this. This is very much US centric responses. But it says no Irish person would be caught dead drinking green beer, and you shouldn't either. Which is a trend I've seen lessen over the last couple of years in the US side, but obviously still quite prevalent. There's Irish Great Inventions number 42, flavored potato chips. You're welcome. Which is they were invented in Ireland. Which is I'm delighted that that's a thing that we invented. It says when someone says, "Hey, my grandmother was from Cavan. Do you know the O'Flahertys?" It says you do, and you know you don't like them.
It is always embarrassing when someone says, "Oh, do you know this person?" You go, "I know, I do know their brother, though."
No, yeah, exactly. It's like Ireland's not actually that small. And you're like, well, actually, no, actually, what David from the Shannon? Yeah, no, actually,
yeah, I do know him. Yeah.
I like this one. It says the day when the Ivory Coast flag accidentally trends. It needs to know the inverse of the Irish flag. It says, why do we wear shamrocks? Because real rocks are too heavy. So there's a couple here that were you kind of need to read in text, and that's fine, because when the most popular man in Ireland isn't even Irish, it's actually Garth Brooks.
I thought it was going to be a joke about Patrick being, Welsh, but
no. It is more topical, more relevant. And then to finish it off, what is St. Patrick's Day without a quip about the English? And it says when everyone's allowed to be Irish except the English. But yeah, so obviously St. Patrick's Day is celebrated differently across the world, but fantastic and weird and wonderful that St. Patrick's Day parades and stuff actually happen across the world, which is insanity in its own right. I do like the US. I do like the US approach. That if St. Patrick's Day doesn't fall on the weekend, they just
move it to the weekend.
They just change the date and put it on the weekend.
I lived in Japan for a while, and they do the same thing. Although I will say it's strange to see. There's actually I lived in Nagasaki, which it's far enough away from like the main areas. It's kind of generally it's a big city, but it's in a kind of the rural area. It's kind of like if you imagine like the Galway of Ireland. It's a big city, but it's surrounded by kind of rural area. And on St. Patrick's Day in Nagasaki, have you ever heard of a band called Teida? Well, they're actually pretty famous. They sell out stadiums in France. They're very famous outside of Ireland. Okay. But they played in Nagasaki, and it was just fantastic. There was so many people there, and once they kind of got into it, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." And then there was Irish dancing. It's surprising to see how much people actually love the idea of Irish culture, that we have our own dance, we have our own thing. We don't really make a big deal of it, but on St. Patrick's Day, when we're allowed to show it off, suddenly everyone knows how to do a jig. Suddenly everyone knows how to do something, and we can be proud of ourselves. And I think that's something that a lot of people like appreciate. We're not always like, Ireland's the best country in the world. Like we are inside saying that. Only on St. Patrick's Day we go, now let's show off what we can do, and then we kind of let other people have their limelight.
Exactly. I'm also having this weird thing. I have a ring light in front of me, and it is like progressively getting brighter. And I'm not. I have no idea. I don't know what it's doing. It's just every like 15 seconds, it's just going one brighter. So anyway, if I overexpose in a while, that's why. Yeah, I mean, around the world, obviously a very big impact on the world. You know, I talked in the last episode about doing it again. Talk about punching above our weight. But you know, in whether it be green beer or it be whiskeys around the world, obviously St. Patrick's Day is a great time to be able to celebrate Irish culture and things that in some cases are a little plastic, Paddy, I know Irish, but in many cases are very nice to reflect upon as well. But in terms of different cultures, I don't know what the I've been to Japan and a couple of times, and my experience with Japanese people was that the knowledge of Ireland was very, apart from being a food safe nation. I think we talked about in the first episode
Yeah.
that there was the food health scandal in Asia in like the 80s, and they know Ireland is food safe, but they've they've no knowledge that shamrocks and emeralds come.
Yeah, I had a few times where I was talking to someone and I said, "Oh, where are you from?" From Ireland. To go, "Oh, what state is that?" It's like, no, it's not America. It's its own country. And then you point to it on a map and they go, "Oh, England." Like, no, try again. Yeah. Or then you go because the Irish for the Japanese for Ireland is Airurando, and then you go, Isulando, or because they've heard of Iceland. Like, oh, is it Iceland? No, try once more. It's Iceland. But then I figured out
almost the right amount, the right letters.
Yeah, I figured out a quick one. There's the Japanese for love is I. So and so I go, oh, it's Rurando, like I love, and they're like, oh, it's like a love land. Like, yes, I'll take that over. What state are you from?
Yeah,
but yeah, there's definitely a bit of learning, I think, to be done. They know of Ireland as a concept, but if you ask where are we on a map, they'd say, don't know.
No, that's understandable. In the US, they have very big traditions around, obviously, the Chicago dyeing the river green. In Philadelphia, they have a thing called the Erin Express, which is massive volumes of pub crawls throughout the city. It actually, I find it quite interesting, is transcended. There was actually a pub crawl, and there still is, called the Erin Express, but it has become the name for the weekend of St. Patrick's Day, which is actually really interesting. That it just means that weekend. It means you're going pub hopping. But it's any bar, and when I lived there, I found it very interesting that once I found out that actually was an Erin Express, was even stranger. They're like, no, it's not actually on the route. I'm like, what route? It's just but obviously all across the US you get different traditions, and one of my favorite things was I would meet people on a regular basis that would be from a small town that would tell me, and I don't know why this is, but I really love this. I've talked about this in a couple of podcasts, but they would always tell me that their town is the third largest St. Patrick's Day parade in the US, and it was always third largest. There was never any other number. And I've talked about this before with people, and it's like, obviously first largest, like the largest, is going to be easy to disprove. Second largest is probably also easy to disprove. Yeah. But like third largest is like far enough, and you're probably not going to look it up, So people will be like, I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's actually the third largest Irish St. Patrick's Day parade in the US. And you'd be like, oh, no way. And they're like, oh, no way, man. You're Irish. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. We're the third largest. Little Rock actually has the shortest St. Patrick's Day parade in the US. I think it's like one city block or something. And it's like their claim to fame. And actually Tim Hurley from Lost Irish, aforementioned Lost Irish, was the Grand Marshal one year with Ric Flair and Alfonso Ribeiro.
For a very short time, though.
Yeah. One
block. Yeah.
So very interesting.
I do love if you're ever in Ireland for the St. Patrick's Day parade. I love the amount of pride as well. Like, if you ever go to the parade, we don't really have marching bands in Ireland. There's a few of them. But all the marching bands from the States that come over, they're so happy, they're so proud, they're so excited to be there. And like Rose, my wife, she's American, and she'd always learn a little bit about the schools. So she'd like look up on the websites and see like, oh, their motto is like the Bears. And so like she sees, let's say, from Little Rock, Arkansas go by, and she goes, "Go Bears!" And they're so excited to see people yelling at them, because it just shows you how friendly we are, and it is great to see like just the pride that people have in being Irish, whether it's the third largest parade in America or pretending it's the third largest parade in America.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going through Hokkaido in Japan and someone says "up the dubs," I mean, you'd be equally as thrilled. But on the flip side of that, there was a Dublin. One of my first days living in the US, it was the replay of the All Ireland final, which also confuses Americans that our Super Bowl. I'll put that there for anyone that's listening. Super Bowl equivalent end of season tournament kind of ended in a draw. And I think it was like the third or fourth year it had been a draw. That it's gone to a and we just replay it. So don't even
Yeah,
go to
that's just it. And they're all like non-professional athletes.
yeah.
Like,
And
I think
even
sometimes you'll go like, oh, this team this year they've got a lot of Gardaí, they've got a lot of police officers. This team has a lot of firefighters. I think they're going to win because the other team has a lot of teachers. And it's
Yeah.
just like very like, oh, let's look at what they do in real life.
well, I found it funny as I was in the States maybe like 3 days when that happened. And I saw a family walking by in Mayo jerseys.
Yeah, for
The
Sam.
the day before the match, and it was in Philadelphia. And I said that to them. I walked by, and I was like, "Oh, I'm fucking delighted to see." They were playing Dublin, and I was going to be supporting Dublin, but and Dublin won, so fair enough. But I saw them walk by, and I like shouted at them on the street, "Oh, Mayo for Sam!" And they just looked at me terrified. And I was like, "You are all Americans. I am so sorry
So
that
sorry.
um, but yeah. So anyway, as is tradition on the show at the moment, I do want to ask you, apart from terrifying Americans, what whiskey do you have for your glass this
Well,
time around?
Our conversation last week actually got me thinking about something. So I'm gonna be drinking 2 stacks. The Blender's Cut Apricot Brandy finish, cask strength. It's a beast of a whiskey. Comes in at 63%, but it does not taste like it because it's a very nice blend. Finished in apple brandy, casks, and it just has, wait for it,
Brandy or apricot brandy?
apple brandy. Wait for the pop. Whoa, not a huge pop off it, but a nice pop. Yeah, so it's
that's okay.
It's Granny Smith apples. It's lovely. It's just toffeed Granny Smith apples. It's lovely, very strong, very nice, but just lovely. Because the last time we were here talking, I don't know if you had a chance to get it yet. We were talking about the 2 stacks cream liqueur.
Just before you go on, look how beautiful that packaging. No, hold that back. Look how beautiful that packaging is. Matte black bottom, so much foil, and it's just luxurious.
Yeah, and they have the blend on them, which I might speak a little bit about that blend in a minute. But first off, what are you drinking?
Well, that's a good question. So I decided this time, in a very unseasonable fashion, to go with the Dingle Sowen. So the last time I had a product that was sourced from G&D. So this time I wanted to go something that was undistilled of an indie distillery. So the Sowen, which is single malt finished in muscatel casks. Muscatel casks, not muscatel, 2 different grape varietals. But for celebrating the seasonal calendar at the Halloween time of the Celtic year. So Samhain, I was very pleased. I was involved in launching this. I was the media launch partner for this, which was great. We had the Dingle Druid on, and she was able to bring us through the Celtic year as well. So I have that in my glass. Again, I am at home enjoying myself, so I have a few ice cubes in here. As I said last time, purists suck it. Don't worry about it.
I always say I make whiskey cocktails. I will put very nice whiskeys in cocktails, and if that's how you like to drink it, that's how you like to drink it. That's
There used to be the global brand ambassador for Roe & Co, and I know it's a brand you love a lot. The old global brand ambassador for Roe & Co was a lovely man called Alan Mulvihill, who has since moved to Guadalajara in Mexico. He actually owns a tequileria out there, and he moved home to be the global brand ambassador for Roe & Co, and then eventually moved back. But when there was one day I think it was something very similar. I put like a good whiskey and I added like ice to it or something, or I used it in an Irish coffee or something. And I got abused on Instagram by like 15 people about not making cocktails with nice whiskey and all this kind of stuff. And Alan is a phenomenal brain for kind of very deconstructed experimental cocktails. And in the Roe & Co bar in the powerhouse, in the distillery, they have a lot of access to very interesting kind of equipment, things that can separate things, chill things, freeze things. There's a lot of a lot of things you wouldn't find in a normal cocktail bar that's very fun to work with. So I got abused for using whiskey in cocktails. And I instantly texted him at like 11 o'clock on a Saturday, and I said, hey, I sent him screenshots of this, and I said, do you want to like piss off a lot of people on the internet and just make really fun cocktails with shit? I said, I'll bring expensive whiskeys. I'll bring 5 expensive whiskeys if you mess with them, basically. And he was like, absolutely. We took a Dingle single malt batch 1, which is an incredibly sought after bottle. We made an ice cream with that. I'm trying to think what else we did. We took a couple of cast strength whiskeys, and we made essentially like a fizz with them. We used champagne. We took others and did kind of like habanero washes with them. We did a fat wash of one. So basically, it was a fun day of just making phenomenal flavors, but really twisting the kind of form and fabric you expect in Irish whiskey. It was a lot of fun, and a lot of people got very annoyed.
Well, I always say, if you get annoyed at that, like if as long as there's a bit of care put into, like, you can always just make a cocktail and just say, oh, I'm going to sub in whiskey A for whiskey B. But if you put a bit of care into it, if you actually look at the flavor profile that's in the whiskey, and you can make a very nice cocktail with it, no one has a leg to stand on when they come to complaining. Yeah, they might say it's a fancy whiskey, but if there's a bit of a care and attention to it, like I think last time we were talking about it, where I said I made a Powers Rye Manhattan, but I changed the recipe a little bit to account for the fact that the Powers Rye is a bit softer. As long as you're not just going a 1-for-1 swap, like if you put a bit of care and attention to it, like it shows that you're not being lazy, you're not being silly, you're not wasting whiskey. You're saying, I'm looking at this whiskey and saying, how could I maybe elevate it a bit? How could I add something to it? How could I do something fun with it? And that's what it's all about.
I mean, I'll go one further. I usually just say, as long as you pay for it, I don't really care what you do with it. Like as long as it's yours, go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is it's a fun industry. It's very opinionated industry. It is one I don't think I would work anywhere else in. And I'm sure you would have lots of other pursuits if you wanted them, but I'm sure you're very happy being the whiskey nerd.
Yes, I do enjoy.
The word "the" really sets you apart there.
I made sure to get the in there, not just whiskey. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, as I said, it's the run of St. Patrick's Day. A lot of whiskey brands will be out there showcasing around the world. A lot of brand ambassadors will be floored for this period of time in bars, restaurants, liquor stores. I know Teeling have a campaign at the moment called Paint the Town Green. Particularly if you look at Celtic Whiskey Shop right now, they have decked out the place in green, which is very effective. I think a really cool campaign. They've branded it really well. I like anything that's caught your eye in this month.
Let's see. Anything that's particularly caught my eye in terms of branding? I'm not sure. I've noticed there's definitely a few. There's definitely a few push. I do like all the new launches that come out. Like, we've had a few, like Green Spot came out with their Quail's Gate recently enough. There's been new launches. There's been new releases. It is interesting to see like the brand saying, at the time of the year, let's take advantage of, let's show off something new. And that's kind of I just like seeing that. I think in terms of other stuff going on in the country, there's lots of good events. Obviously, there's gonna be cocktail evenings. There's gonna be great little tour experiences. There's a few. So I think Row & Co are doing an Irish coffee workshop or experience for a week around St. Patrick's Day. So it's just cool to see like them leaning into the events and leaning into the fact that it's for sharing whiskey. Yeah,
their Irish coffee glasses are also dynamite. They're not Libby glasses. They're not the kind of traditional style. I really like their glasses. I know Tullamore Dew were doing kind of a series of kind of their brand ambassador with Richmond Brands was doing some Irish coffee masterclasses as well. I'm not sure if they're leading up to St. Patrick's Day or not, but it is good to see in particular Irish coffees getting that highlight. I only say that because I love Irish coffee.
You're an obsessed. I will say recent months I've come, I think, a bit fonder of the Belfast coffee, which is one made with poutine. It's cold
And
brew as well. Yeah, it's cold. It's got puts in it, and it has this nice kind of subtle earthiness. And I think it's quite nice. It's a bit enjoyable. It's a bit different. Now I might move back to Irish coffees in a while once I've gotten my fill of Belfast coffees. But I think it'd be a while before I get my fill of Belfast coffees.
that's understandable. 1661, obviously the makers of that. Their house Irish coffee also has Paris John's Lane. If you want the hot version, which I also think is very interesting. Their hot Irish coffee, rather than the Belfast coffee, which is their creation. Excuse me, as you correctly said, the Belfast coffee uses cold brew, but their Irish coffee also uses cold brew that they just warm up.
Just heat up.
Which I think is fantastic. That they've kind of just like that it's multi-purpose, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, then also in March we have obviously International Women's Day. I think it runs into a whole month of celebrating. I know the Irish Whiskey Association did an event celebrating and highlighting the women of the industry of Irish whiskey. And I think we talked off air about there is kind of a stereotype and also a trend and that women have better olfactory senses than men. And I've seen that contested. It's something I strongly believe in, but I have no data either way. That's why I'm going to put an apparently on this. But you'll also notice in future episodes I say apparently when I haven't fact checked something.
You've looked at one site on the internet and you've said that'll do.
Someone said it to me and I haven't validated this. That's when I say apparently. But apparently women have stronger or better olfactory senses than men, which is also why you'll see a lot of women in the blending departments and sensory departments in a lot of distilleries. And I know we have quite a few female blenders and female lab leaders in Ireland in the Irish whiskey industry, and also across Scotch and a number of other whiskey industries as well.
There's actually a huge I wouldn't say I hate to use the word a huge expansion. I think there's just been more awareness of women in the whiskey industry because there've been female distillers in Ireland for female blenders as well for a long time, but recently enough there's been more like of a spotlight being put into it. Like you said, like there's more women in the industry, there's more women consuming whiskey as well, and it's just good to highlight that, to show that it's not just an all boys club. It's not just, what did you call your group, the whiskey wankers with your cigars and your suits and your
Go back to the last episode, if anyone's wondering.
It's a bit of it can be more approachable for everyone. And in the Irish Whiskey Society, we're doing an event where we're highlighting women whiskey makers. So we've got all different brands. We've got like Jennifer Nickerson from Tipperary. We've got Cot Baxter from Ahaskra, which I think I'm saying that name right. It's AHAS Ahaskra, and they're picking out whiskies they like, and we're kind of, it's not just about what they're making, what they're doing. It's about what they like, and showing off that the various profiles, that it's not always going to be something that's light and flowery and easy to drink. Women can, as they're just people, they can just drink whatever they want, and it's all about showing off that it's not a boring society. And that's kind of what I was saying last time with the Irish Whiskey Society, where it is a lot more open, a lot more honest. Like we still do skew, as one of our members says, male, pale, and stale, but we're definitely getting an increase in female kind of male, pale, and stale. And once I heard that, I was like, I am stealing that and I am using that in future. But we are tending young. Definitely in the last, I don't know, couple of months, the average age has dropped a lot, and we've definitely skewed a bit. So it is good to see much more, and good to take a month to highlight female distillery, female whiskey makers.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's sorry, I'm still laughing about that descriptor. And I mean, it's also one of the things I see a lot of when it comes to Mother's Day, which also kind of coincides in this month. A lot of the time you'll see a lot of very different marketing and kind of, whereas if it was Father's Day, you'd see every whiskey under the sun marketed, and the very same people will market cream liqueurs and vodkas and gins, and will never mention whiskeys, even if they're whiskey retailers. And I think you'll be seeing a lot of pushes away from that kind of mentality, in that sense that there's a gendered difference in liquids, just because everyone drinks whatever they like. But I think it'll be very interesting going forward to see how the general consumers, be it in the Irish whiskey society or how marketing changes that way. When it comes to, you mentioned Caught Nivosh there, she's the head distiller of a Haskra that's in the middle of construction and on the way to commissioning. The Haskra guys are very strong in the area I live in. Funnily enough, I'm in North Dublin, which is nowhere near East Galway, which is where Haskra is. But they're very strong in this area. And I was actually in my local off license. It's Carry Out. Carry Out being one of my favorite chains of off licenses in the country. And I asked the guy behind the counter, I just said, like, what sells? Like, what, I was just shooting the shit. I was, what sells, what doesn't sell? Anything surprising, that, it sells. They have a Haskra malt. I think it might be a 19-year-old malt in this like pine chew. Instead of a I had a gift tube around here somewhere, but I don't know where it is at the moment. Instead of a cardboard one, it's wooden, and it kind of opens as a box. And one of the things they were saying was that the presentation of that, the bottle is no different. It just slots into the wooden tube.
Their packaging is fantastic. Like some of their Clan Color releases, they do. It's like, it's not just a standard box. It's like, it opens up. I don't know how to describe it. For people who are listening, it's gonna be a terrible description. But if you imagine a box where it opens out completely, and then it just turns into one flat line, and it tells the story of the Clan Color, the three Color brothers, and it's really cool to see like the effort that was put into the packaging and showing off that, look, this is, as we were saying last time about like it's not just about what you put into the bottle, it's also what the bottle is, to get the customers involved, get the customers interested in your whiskey. Because you can be making the best stuff in the world, but if no one's drinking it, you'll eventually go out of business and stop making it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, like any business, you need some form of demand to keep the supply up. I'm actually very interested to see how Clan Color does, because in the world of drinks, from both experience and kind of watching market trends, but I will also emphasize experience in like mythology doesn't sell, if that makes sense. So the stories of mythological things that sound nice and romantic to people tend to be nice and romantic to the people whose mythology it is, if that makes sense. And it tends to be very difficult to sell. And obviously Clan Color is not mythology, but it is in that same realm of storybook history, if that makes sense. Because it's not living history. It's not romanticized history, but it's a recourse history. They're bringing this back, so I'm very interested to see how that lands with people in terms of a message and a story, because a lot of the times some of those can be lost, but some can be done really well. So I'm really excited to see how they land that from Haskra in East Galway. And also it's set up to be a very very interesting distillery in the old mill.
I think they're commissioning their stills in April, so not too long away now until they're actually in the middle of making their own whiskey, and then 3 years down the line we might be tasting it.
What one would hope.
One would hope. Well, they might leave it to 4. Sometimes some distilleries are like they're letting it go past the bare minimum before they bottle. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, like as we said, like we talked a few times now about the renaissance of Irish whiskey. That Irish whiskey is coming back kind of to the forefront, but it'll be a few years yet. Maybe it'll be at least 10 years before we see 10-year-old Irish whiskey. Yeah, because some of the distilleries.
I don't think we've hit the renaissance yet. Personally, I think we're in the fledgling stage of it, but it's when, like you said, that all distilleries have 10-year-old stock. That's when we're going to see the real boom and the personalities in particular come out, because we had a period where there was kind of a fear that everyone would be a mini Cooley. And then it's almost the flip side fear that everyone's going to be a mini G&D, and I don't think anyone will. But it's when that personality shines through in the spirit. I think in a number of years' time that we're going to see a lot of that renaissance, that boom, that pickup happen, because we're getting there. We're picking up momentum, but I think we're going to have a big boom in a few years' time.
And that's one thing I like about not just the distilleries, but the kind of boom in bonders and bottlers you've got, like with JJ Corey, with Two Stacks that I'm enjoying right now. They've got, you've got whiskey bonders and blenders that are planning to not just take from G&D, not just take from one distillery, but take stock from multiple places and say, now that the whiskey is, let's say, 5 or 10 years old, we know what the DNA of that malt is like. We know what that taste is like. Where can we blend that with somewhere else to create something else, maybe something better than some of its parts? And like you said, like that won't happen properly for another few years until we have all the distilleries with all their flavor profiles, with all that library of flavors available to our bonders and blenders. Because if you look at the Scottish brands, like Monkey Shoulder, I think it's a very famous cocktail whiskey over in Scotland, but I think it's made of 20 different whiskeys. Johnny Walker as well, very popular, but also made of loads of different whiskeys from loads of different distilleries. And we don't really have that in Ireland.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm sure we will see it. And again, that Johnny Walker model was a very, very clever model when it was invented, because there's so many whiskeys in it. If you lose supply of 3 or 5 or 7 in a year, because they're 7 of 50, that drop won't be missed in terms of the flavor profile, if that makes sense. Which is a phenomenal idea for consistency. And I think Two Stacks are one that I'm very gleefully watching to see what they come up with. Hey guys,
they're if you start talking to them, like, they're not secretive about it. Like, they say, "Oh, we got plans to do this. We got some of these casks in. They're just so excited about what they're doing. Like, obviously it is a business, but it is the passion behind the business that makes it super successful. And that's one thing. I was talking to there's a woman, I won't say her name here, because she was planning on thinking of starting off a brand of whiskey, and she was like, "Oh, I'm just kind of dipping my toe in the water. What should I do? How many lines should I make?" And I actually referenced Two Stacks, and I said, "Look, Two Stacks have essentially one type of whiskey. Now they use 5 different whiskeys. It's if you're watching, you can see there it is. There's 5 different types of whiskey that go into the blend, but that's the same whiskey that goes in here. It's the same profile. They just finish it in different ways. They put it at different strengths. So once you have a good profile, you can then expand with it. And it's great to see, like, the guys did that, like, found a good whiskey. Like you said, they were iterating a few different types of that cream liqueur. And once they have that flavor profile dialed in, you can then adjust and adapt it and grow. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing things like that brand doing with multiple distilleries, where they get that kind of flavor library up.
Yeah, and as we've said in previous shows, they are going out of their way to lay down new make stock from different distilleries, where they are going in and commissioning, not just buying whatever the stock is on the still that day. They're going in and they're commissioning 100% rye and 50% rye, and projects that have never been done in Ireland before, for their own warehouses. And I think that's really, and I'm not giving away any secrets here. These are all things they've talked about, and then they've, I think it's something that will really set Two Stacks apart in years to come, that they're going out of their way, because a lot of bonders can, as we said previously on different shows, can become caught in the trap of sourcing from G&D perpetually, if that makes sense. And it's very difficult to then differentiate yourself down the line, because in the world of international sales right now, if you go looking for distributors around the world, the Irish market isn't as large as Scotch. And while there are thousands of Scotch brands, there are tens of Irish brands, and that tens is making the market very crowded. And one of the things I've not even recently, of the last couple of years, I've been seeing and experiencing and hearing is that there's not some and a lot of distributors and importers, etc., aren't even considering brands that don't have distilleries.
Yeah,
And
because there's only so many times you can kind of drink the same whiskey just with a different packaging, and it does, as you said, dilute the market by competing with essentially itself, just with a different label.
Yep, and it shows, when having, I suppose, devil's advocate for the importers is that they're saying it shows longevity, commitment to long time in the market, etc., success in the market, etc., like things like that. But also gives an indication that they're willing to make things that are different and differentiated, if that makes sense. But I think when you see brands like Two Stacks, while I'm sure they will still run into the distributors that are turning their nose up, but that they don't have a distillery, they'll be able to find the distributors that will very much care about the innovation that they're bringing, and I think that'll really set them apart in years to come. Small company, tied with Cologne as well, both very popular brands, so I don't think there's going to be any problem in their success. Maybe just seeing how they both scale up in future years, I think it'd be very interesting.
Yeah, because it does. There was one point that you mentioned about, like, Johnny Walker, let's say, has 50 whiskeys. Let's say they lose 1, 2, or even 7. You're not really going to lose a huge amount of flavor. But currently with Irish whiskey, let's say, as we said, 10-year-old whiskey, if you want to source 10-year-old grain or 10-year-old malt, it's only from a certain type of distillery, and eventually those might stop selling to sourcers, might stop selling to bonders. So we do need the new blood, as it were, to come up and create that environment where we have a good industry, where it's not just good Irish brand ambassadors, good Irish kind of selling, but not a lot of good different Irish products.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely one of the things I think it should be also taken into account is there is an incoming shock, a supply shock in Irish whiskey. There's a very I've spoken to Brendan Carty about this before. I think on 3 Drams, that there is the ability to purchase even young Irish malt has almost been completely decimated. So there will be a supply shock. In whether it gets passed on to the consumers or even noticeable by the consumers is different. But when you're looking at these brands that don't have their own distilleries, or the distilleries are too young to have their own products, I think we'll see a very quick reshuffle in the next couple of years, if it's not this year. And there are obviously still some places that will sell you those 5, 6, 9, 10, 15, 20-year-olds if they exist. But they have, some of those have leverage deals. So for every 1,000 liters or 1,000 LPA you buy of aged spirit, you have to buy 5, or even in some cases 10,000 liters of new make grain. And not only do you just end up with like an inordinate amount of grain that you didn't particularly want in the beginning, if you to buy 10,000 liters of grain, say even if it's at £1 a liter, which it's not, but if it was £1 a liter and you need to buy it at 10,000,
that's a lot of expense.
That you tie up in capital. So a lot of the smaller brands can't do things like that. Not even some of the smaller brands. A lot of the medium-sized brands can't do that either. So I think we'll see in the coming months and years some brand plans accelerated in terms of what's coming to market. Maybe some people are just going to hold out for longer or whatnot. Or some people will bring new expressions to the market, because there's definitely demand of mature Irish whiskey massively outstrips supply.
And I think one of the problems the distillery is also kind of facing is there's almost, in terms of oversaturation of markets, if you think of gins and vodkas, the stuff that distillery might have used to been able to rely on to be able to tide them over while their stock matures, like it's not just Irish whiskey, it's not just Irish gin. You've got gins from all around the world essentially that you're competing with, and so it's I think harder for brands to have, as you said, to get over that initial kind of hump where they have their own stuff, where they have their own capital essentially that they can sell rather than just holding it in a bonded warehouse.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
spoke in the last episode about we'll touch on it lightly about consumers around the world are moving to local, which also, just on a side note, also trends very closely to recessions on a just that's not a funny kind.
Yeah.
But it does it, in recessionary times people look inwards a lot more. And obviously the world's in a funny time, but consumers right now are looking at local. And as I said in the last episode, Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey and Japanese whiskey or whatever can't be reproduced in any other country, so that doesn't really affect them all that much, if that makes sense. But gin can. Gin produced in Ireland isn't theoretically that differentiated from gin produced in India or in Canada or in Guatemala or in Australia. And also, like you said, people will be relying on these white spirits. And I don't think, well, definitely in most places, gin's had its heyday. It's €50 gin is done and has been for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm not really even sure, as a person that sells spirits for a daily job, I'm not really sure how €50 gin ever became a thing, because in a lot of cases the gin was higher price than the whiskey. People had 5 and 10-year-old whiskeys that weren't €50.
Like I would sometimes mention Dingle to friends, and they'd say, "Oh, the gin that really expensive." I was like, "No, they make whiskey too." And it was whiskey distillery that made gin, and then the gin almost
I'm gonna just to not collate those points. Dingle gin was not a €50 gin.
No, but it was known as an upmarket, good quality.
Good quality, but they aren't the echelon I was talking about. They're still the 30-35, which is still the market that sells, on a side note. But yeah, there was some very expensive gins that outsold the same distillery whiskeys that were sourced that were 10 years old or something. And it was just, you were sitting there looking at one, you're holding one bottle going, all right, I can buy this juniper vodka for €60, but I can buy this 10-year-old single malt for €40. And you just kind of,
which one do you
yeah.
Now, we have been a little bit down, I think, the last couple of minutes about the current humps that Irish whiskey, but I think it's important to note that there are going to be challenges, and it just means that the brands that survive, the whiskeys we get at the end, are just going to be that much better. I think it means that it's the brands that have been successful, the distillers that have been passionate, they've not just been in it for the laugh, they've actually made good stuff. So I think, as we said, like the Renaissance Irish whiskey, it is still coming. They might have a couple of years, as you said, with supply shocks coming down the line. But I think as long as we keep promoting it, you keep doing 3 Dams, I keep making cocktails, we're going to have a good time and we're going to have some good whiskeys.
Exactly. And the great thing about a supply shock is it's not a demand shock. It's not that nobody's buying it. It's just too many people want to buy it. Yeah, exactly. Which is the main thing. So overall, as I said in the last time, we've Provine in March as well, where you get is the global showcase for all spirits, but Irish whiskey is obviously the focus of what we're talking about as well, around the world. Go to your whiskey festivals, talk to your brands. These are the people that the whiskey ambassadors and the brand owners and everything, they're the people that want to show you what they're making.
And when you're at whiskey festivals, always ask them, what have you got? Because they might have a cheeky sample under the table that they're not showing off. But if you ask them what they've got, they'll say, oh yeah, I've got this, you might want to try it. So these are the people, I said, they're proud, they're happy, they want to show it off. And if you show you're interested in this, it also helps keep their motivation alive. It helps them know, what are they making, what do you like, what should they be making in the future.
Mike Cowman, Lord of the Last Drop, on most social medias, does a great series pretty much every Whiskey Live. things not to do at whiskey festivals, which is always good. Check them out on TikTok. And a lot of the things that you'll see people to walk up and be like, "What's the most expensive whiskey? What's under the table?"
Mm.
And those are the things that won't ingratiate yourself to brands. For me, for going to these whiskey festivals, it's very much trying to walk up, engage with the brands, and find ones. Go when you're going to Whiskey Live, figure out Cork Whiskey Fest, another example of something that is going to be huge this year. Figure out if you're going to Cork Whiskey Fest and you're going to the showcase day where there's lots of brands, or you're going to Whiskey Live where you've every brand in Ireland at the festival. Figure out ahead of time what brands are going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Write yourself a list of the must-sees and see them first.
I was going to say that. You have to pick your ones you want to go to. And if you have a brand that you want to see, ask them what their favorite whiskey is, because sometimes they'll have 4 or 5 whiskeys and you can try to drink them all, but you'll get escorted out, I think, by security pretty quickly.
The 8th brand. No. Yeah. Like for me, Ecklinville, Dunville's, Ecklinville, like I cannot get my hands on a bottle of Old Cumber. I have been this is like the bane of my existence. I have never been able to find. I've never been able to get to the sales link on time for a bottle of Old Cumber. So this year's Whiskey Live, and I went last time, and they did run out of their Old Cumber. I think they brought like 2 sample bottles. It was only like a kind of a soft launch of the brand. It's a blended pot still. At this point, it'll eventually become a single pot. You know, the whole brand's going to evolve. And the Ecklinville is just one of the, like, talk about exciting brands in Irish whiskey. So this year, my plan is like quick and early, go ingratiate myself with, be it Shane or Jarlath or Stephen McGuinness, and get myself a bloody sample of this. But I know ahead of time that's what I'm going, number one.
Yeah.
And know yourself where you want to go, know your own tolerance levels, and don't be overzealous in that fact, you know.
Yeah, they always have loads of water around. Make sure you drink water. Because last Whiskey Live Dublin, as you said, like the worst thing you can do is ask what's your most expensive whiskey. I go one better. I think the worst thing a person can do is just walk up and say, and for the people listening at home, I just lifted my glass and say, "Here." I've seen people just do that. Just walk up, hold the glass.
I think that's the second worst. The worst is to grab the bottle.
Oh, okay. Well, look at that. That's almost like stealing the whiskey. I'd almost go that's too far.
Not like from being on both sides of the table. That you're done. You're done, buddy. You're out. But on the flip side of that, at the last Whiskey Live, it was the last session, or maybe it was the Saturday night session, and I nipped off 5 minutes early, and I ran to a brand that I really like. I'm not going to name just because they were nice and cheeky for me. And I walked up to them, and the people of the RDS were closing things down. They were like, no one serves anymore. And I walked up to someone on the stand that I really wanted to go to, and they knew me and I know them, and we're friends. And I went up to them and I was like, lads, I'm an exhibitor, you're an exhibitor. Like, can I
let's make something happen? Yeah.
No, yeah, can I was like, there's this whiskey right here. I want to try this. Can I try it? And your man was like, listen, man, we're done. Like, I'm gonna get kicked out if I pour another sample. And I was like, is there anything you could do? And he goes, listen, if you pick up the bottle and pour it for yourself, then I can't get in trouble theoretically, right? And I was like, all right, cool. Love loopholes, no problem. And I pick up the bottle and I opened the cork, and we did the same thing. We do in every episode. I went, right? I did that, and someone else from the brand who didn't know me as well was in front of the stand.
Yeah.
And saw me do that and like lost the fucking plot. And I was like, no. He told me that this is a calculated thing where I'm not like we're cool. We are cool, I swear. but I got my sample anyway. That was nice. It was all
Yeah.
resolved very easily.
Are
but
you
yeah.
going to be at Whiskey Live Dublin this year, just personal or any professional capacity?
Both, everything, a little bit
Yeah.
of every category. Might even see if we can get some podcasting done at it as well. I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see
Yeah.
what's possible, but it's every brand which what under the sun is going to be at Whiskey Live. I said anyone who's anyone in the world of Irish whiskey will be there in terms of punter and brand. I'm sure you've your tickets bought already.
Oh, I'll be there for both days. One day I'll be on the Irish Whiskey Society table. So if anyone is going to be showing up at Whiskey Live Dublin, if you're going to be there on the Friday, come by the Irish Whiskey Society, say hi. We will have tickets available for events. We'll have stuff going on. We have good samples of very good single cask Irish whiskey that we sourced ourselves from good brands. So if you're there, just come by, say hi, and we'll see what we can talk about.
Exactly. If people wanted to find you personally online as we wrap up the show here, where should we be looking for the Whiskey Nerd, Mr. Matt?
Primarily, I'd say primarily on YouTube, on The Whiskey Nerd. Although I do have an Instagram account, The Whiskey Nerd as well. So either way, find me there.
If people are going to try to contact you though, tell you how much they loved your Granny Smith apple whiskey sour, are you easier to contact on the Instagram, or is it the Facebook for you?
I think it's YouTube. YouTube actually, it's easier to find comments on YouTube because Instagram, you can get likes, you can get things. I've sometimes missed messages from people because the Instagram spam filters have caught a few messages, and I've been like a month later and I see, I go check my spam messages, I see a nice message of someone asking me for advice on a present, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm sure this person their birthday has passed by, but here's what I would have suggested you buy them. So I think on YouTube it's easier to reach me there because the spam filter seems a little less strict.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much to you, Matt. And a huge thank you to our sponsors, irishmalts.com, who are also the people behind 3drams.com. If you are looking for Irish whiskies, gins, and putchings delivered direct to your door, check out irishmalts.com, your one-stop shop for Irish whiskey and everything in between. I have been your host, Matt Healy, from Potstilled.com, also known as Potstilled Matt. Matt, you have been our co-host, and it's been fantastic to have you here yet again for episode number 4 of the Middle Cup Podcast, Mr. The Whiskey Nerd. Partnered, of course, with the Whiskey Noob, Rose, who is not on the show, but is a. I am very fond of her content on your channel and her own channel, bringing a different aspect of the whiskey world to both cocktails and whiskey tastings. So to you, to everyone at home, and of course to Irish Malts, a very big thank you. And I hope you have a lovely evening and good night.
Sláinte.